Many startups fail even though the founders work extremely hard. They build products, they raise money, they hire people, they launch features, they follow plans. Then they discover that customers do not really want what they built. Eric Ries argues that startups fail not only because they lack effort, but because they learn too slowly. In the Lean Startup, he presents a method for building new products under extreme uncertainty. A startup is not simply a small version of a large company. A large company usually executes a known business model. A startup searches for one. That means the main job is not to create a perfect plan and follow it blindly. The main job is to test assumptions, learn from customers, and adjust before too much time and money are wasted. Ries calls this validated learning. The goal is to learn what customers truly value, not what the team hopes they value. The core process is build, measure, learn. Build a small version of the idea. Measure how customers actually respond. Learn whether the original assumption was right or wrong. Then decide whether to continue, change direction, or stop. This is why the minimum viable product, or MVP, matters. An MVP is not a bad product. It is the smallest version that allows the team to test an important assumption. The central lesson of the Lean Startup is that entrepreneurship should be managed through disciplined learning. The startup that learns faster can avoid building products nobody wants and can use evidence, not vanity, to guide its next move. Blink 1. A startup is an experiment under extreme uncertainty. Ries defines a startup as a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. This definition matters because it separates startups from ordinary small businesses and from established companies. A restaurant opening in a familiar neighborhood may face risk, but the basic model is known. People understand food, rent, staffing, menus, and customer service. A startup trying to create a new technology, new market, or new business model faces a different challenge. It does not know exactly who the customer is. It does not know which features matter. It does not know how much people will pay. It does not know which channel will work. It does not know whether the problem is painful enough to support a business. Because of this uncertainty, traditional planning becomes dangerous when treated too seriously. A long forecast may look professional, but many of its assumptions are guesses. The market may respond differently. Customers may ignore the feature the founders love. A cheaper competitor may appear. A distribution channel may fail. Ries does not reject management. He rejects pretending that uncertainty is certainty. A startup should be managed like an experiment. Every major assumption should be identified and tested. Do customers have this problem? Will they pay for the solution? Can we reach them affordably? Will they continue using the product? Can the business grow sustainably? This experimental mindset changes the founder's job. The founder is not only a visionary. The founder is also a scientist of the business model. The goal is not to prove the original idea correct. The goal is to discover what is true before the company runs out of time, money, and energy. Blink 2. Validated learning is the real measure of startup progress. Startups often measure progress through activity. How many features were built? How many meetings were held? How many press mentions appeared? How many people signed up? How much money was raised? These numbers can feel encouraging, but they do not always prove that the business is working. Ries argues that the true measure of startup progress is validated learning. Validated learning means learning confirmed by real customer behavior. Not opinions alone, not internal excitement, not vanity metrics. Actual evidence that customers care enough to use, pay, return, recommend, or change behavior. This idea is powerful because startups can fool themselves easily. A team may spend 6 months building a product and call that progress. If customers do not want it, the work did not move the company closer to a viable business. A founder may receive praise from friends, journalists, or investors. But praise is not the same as demand. A landing page may attract visitors, but visitors are not the same as retained customers. Validated learning forces the team to ask, what did we learn that changes our understanding of the customer? Which assumption was confirmed? Which assumption was disproven? What evidence supports the next decision? Learning should be practical, not abstract. A team does not learn merely by thinking harder. It learns by putting something in front of customers and observing behavior. For example, if a startup believes small business owners will pay for automated bookkeeping, it can test whether owners sign up, connect accounts, complete onboarding, and pay after a trial. The learning comes from behavior, not polite interest. Validated learning protects the startup from false progress. It reminds founders that the goal is not to build the product they imagined. The goal is to discover the product and business model customers actually value. Blink 3. The build, measure, learn loop should move quickly. The central engine of the lean startup is the build, measure, learn loop. First, the team builds something. Then it measures customer response. Then, it learns whether the idea is moving in the right direction. The goal is to move through this loop as quickly as possible. Many teams make the mistake of starting with build and staying there too long. They build a complete product before measuring anything. They add features before learning whether customers want the core idea. They polish design before knowing whether the problem matters. By the time they receive feedback, they have already invested too much. Ries wants startups to reverse the thinking. Before building, ask what needs to be learned. What is the riskiest assumption? What evidence would confirm or disprove it? What is the smallest thing we can build to test it? This makes the loop more disciplined. A company should not build randomly just because it wants to move fast. It should build the minimum thing needed to learn the next important truth. Speed matters because startups have limited resources. Every month spent building the wrong product consumes money, morale, and opportunity. A faster learning loop gives the team more chances to correct course. The measurement step is equally important. If the company does not define the right metrics, it may learn the wrong lesson. A spike in website traffic may look good, but if users do not return, the product may not create real value. The learning step requires honesty. If evidence contradicts the idea, the team must face it. The build, measure, learn loop is not about moving fast for its own sake. It is about shortening the distance between assumption and evidence. Blink 4. The minimum viable product tests the riskiest assumption. The minimum viable product is one of the most famous ideas in the book. An MVP is the smallest version of a product that allows the team to begin learning from customers. It is not the smallest product the company can imagine. It is the smallest product that can test a meaningful assumption. This distinction matters. Some people misunderstand MVP as an excuse to release low-quality work. Ries does not recommend careless products that damage trust. The MVP should be good enough to produce useful learning from the intended customer. It may be simple, manual, limited, or incomplete, but it must test something real. For example, a startup that wants to build a complex software platform may begin with a simple landing page to test demand. It may offer a concierge version where humans perform the service manually before software exists. It may build one feature for one customer segment instead of the full product. It may create a prototype that tests whether users understand the value. The point is to avoid building more than necessary before learning. If the riskiest assumption is that customers will pay, the MVP should test payment. If the riskiest assumption is that users can understand the workflow, the MVP should test usability. If the riskiest assumption is that the problem exists, the MVP should test customer pain. A large company often tries to protect its brand by delaying release until everything feels polished. A startup does not usually have that luxury, but it also should not confuse speed with sloppiness. The MVP should be designed around learning, not embarrassment. The question is, what can we build now that will teach us whether we are moving toward a real business? Blink 5. Vanity metrics can make a weak business look successful. Ries warns strongly against vanity metrics. Vanity metrics are numbers that look impressive but do not help the team make better decisions. Total registered users, total downloads, total page views, total press mentions, total followers. These numbers may rise over time and create the feeling of progress, but they can hide deeper problems. A product may have many sign-ups and very few active users. A marketing campaign may create traffic but no paying customers. A mobile app may be downloaded many times but quickly deleted. A startup may receive media attention while failing to retain customers. Vanity metrics are dangerous because they flatter the team. They make investors, employees, and founders feel that momentum exists. But if the numbers do not reveal cause and effect, they do not support learning. Ries prefers actionable metrics. Actionable metrics show whether a specific change improved customer behavior. For example, instead of reporting total users, a startup might track activation rate, retention rate, conversion rate, referral rate, revenue per customer, or cohort behavior. Cohort analysis is especially useful. It compares groups of customers who joined at different times. If customers who joined after a product change stay longer or pay more, the company learns something useful. If overall user numbers grow only because marketing brings in more people while retention remains poor, the business is weaker than it appears. Good metrics should be simple enough to understand and honest enough to guide decisions. They should help the team answer, are customers becoming more engaged? Are they returning? Are they paying? Are they telling others? Are recent changes making the business model stronger? A startup does not need numbers that make it look successful. It needs numbers that reveal the truth. Blink 6. Innovation accounting creates discipline in uncertain work. Traditional accounting is useful for established businesses. It tracks revenue, expenses, profit, assets, and cash flow. But early startups often have little revenue and uncertain business models. If they are judged only by traditional financial results, leaders may either panic too early or celebrate meaningless activity. Ries introduces innovation accounting as a way to measure progress when the company is still searching. Innovation accounting begins with defining the baseline. How do customers behave today? How many sign up? How many activate? How many return? How many pay? How many recommend the product? The startup then makes changes and measures whether those numbers improve. The goal is to move from the baseline toward a sustainable business model. This creates accountability. A team cannot simply say, "We are learning." It must show evidence of learning. Are the metrics improving because of the experiments? Is the company moving closer to product-market fit? Are assumptions becoming more certain? Innovation accounting also helps prevent waste. Without disciplined measurement, teams may keep building features because building feels productive. They may avoid difficult evidence because it threatens the idea. They may interpret every result in a favorable way. A clear accounting system makes it harder to hide. The startup should define hypotheses, run experiments, and compare results. For example, if the hypothesis is that users will invite colleagues after receiving value, the team can measure how often that happens. If the number remains low after several changes, the team must question the assumption. Innovation accounting turns uncertainty into a structured learning process. It does not remove risk. It makes risk visible. That visibility helps founders, teams, and investors decide whether to persevere or pivot. Blink 7. A pivot is a structured change in strategy, not a panic reaction. One of the most important decisions in a startup is whether to persevere or pivot. To persevere means to continue along the current path because evidence suggests the strategy is working. To pivot means to change some fundamental part of the strategy while keeping what has been learned. Ries defines a pivot as a structured course correction. It is not random desperation. It is not abandoning everything whenever results disappoint. It is a deliberate change based on evidence. A company may pivot its customer segment. The product may solve a real problem, but for a different group than originally expected. It may pivot its value proposition. Customers may care about a different benefit than the one the company emphasized. It may pivot from a complex product to one important feature. It may change its revenue model, growth channel, technology approach, or platform strategy. The key is learning. A good pivot uses evidence from the previous experiments. The team does not start from zero. It takes what customers revealed and changes direction. This is emotionally hard. Founders often become attached to their original idea. They may interpret weak results as temporary. They may keep adding features rather than admitting the core assumption is wrong. Investors and employees may also pressure the team to stay the course because change feels like failure. Ries argues that refusing to pivot can be more dangerous. A startup can spend years perfecting a product for a market that does not exist. At the same time, pivoting too quickly can also be harmful. Some ideas need time and iteration. The discipline is to use evidence, not emotion. A pivot should answer, what did we learn? Which assumption failed? What new strategy does the evidence support? The strongest startups are neither stubborn nor chaotic. They are adaptive. Blink 8. Small batches reduce waste and speed up learning. Ries borrows from lean manufacturing and applies the idea of small batches to startups. In traditional mass production, companies often make large batches to reduce unit costs, but large batches can hide defects and delay learning. If a mistake is discovered late, many units may already be affected. Small batches reveal problems earlier. In startups, large batches often appear as long development cycles. A team spends months building many features before showing customers anything. When feedback finally arrives, the team may discover that much of the work was unnecessary. Small batches mean releasing smaller changes more frequently. This allows the company to test assumptions, catch problems, and improve faster. Software companies can use continuous deployment, experiments, prototypes, and quick iterations. But the principle applies beyond software. A training company can test one workshop before creating a full course library. A food business can test one product at a local market before building a large production process. A service provider can test a narrow package before expanding its offer. Small batches reduce emotional waste as well. When a team invests heavily in a large project, it becomes harder to admit the project is wrong. When the investment is smaller, learning feels less threatening. Small batches also improve quality. Problems are easier to identify when fewer changes happen at once. If a startup changes 10 things and metrics improve, it may not know which change worked. If it changes 1 or 2 things and measures carefully, learning becomes clearer. The lesson is not that every product should be released incomplete. The lesson is that learning improves when the distance between work and feedback is shorter. In uncertain environments, big hidden bets are dangerous. Small visible bets are safer. Blink 9. Growth must be built on engines, not hope. Ries describes different engines of growth. An engine of growth is the mechanism that allows a startup to acquire, retain, and expand customers sustainably. The sticky engine depends on retention. Customers keep using the product over time. A subscription service, workplace tool, or social platform often needs stickiness. If users leave quickly, growth becomes expensive because the company must constantly replace them. The viral engine depends on customers bringing in other customers. A product spreads because users invite friends, colleagues, or network members. For viral growth to work, sharing must be built into the product experience, not merely requested. The paid engine depends on acquiring customers profitably through paid channels. If a company can earn more from a customer than it costs to acquire them, it can grow by reinvesting. If acquisition costs exceed customer value, spending more only increases losses. These engines help founders think more clearly about growth. Growth is not simply wanting more users. It must come from a repeatable mechanism. A startup should identify which engine fits its product and measure whether it is actually working. For example, a paid advertising strategy may create sign-ups, but if customers do not pay enough over time, the engine is broken. A viral product may attract invitations, but if invited users do not activate, the spread stops. A sticky product may have loyal users, but if new customers arrive too slowly, growth remains limited. Ries warns against launching big marketing campaigns before the engine works. Marketing can temporarily inflate numbers, but it cannot fix a weak product, poor retention, or broken economics. Sustainable growth comes from customers whose behavior creates more customers, more revenue, or more usage over time. Hope is not an engine. Blink 10. Lean startup thinking is disciplined, not careless. The lean startup method is sometimes misunderstood. Some people interpret it as an excuse to move fast without thinking, release unfinished products, avoid planning, or constantly change direction. That is not Ries's message. The method is disciplined. It asks founders to define assumptions, build experiments, measure honestly, and make decisions based on evidence. It does not celebrate chaos. It tries to reduce it. A startup still needs vision. Without vision, experiments become random. The founder needs a belief about what could be valuable in the world. The lean startup method tests the path toward that vision. It asks which parts of the plan are facts and which parts are assumptions. It then turns the riskiest assumptions into experiments. The method also has limits. Not every industry can release early products to customers without serious consequences. Healthcare, aviation, financial services, infrastructure, and safety-critical technologies require stronger controls. A careless MVP in those areas can harm people or violate trust. Even in consumer products, releasing something too rough can damage credibility if the customer expects reliability. The principle must be adapted. Test early, but test responsibly. Learn quickly, but do not shift risk unfairly onto customers. Measure behavior, but do not ignore ethics. The deeper lesson is that entrepreneurship is management under uncertainty. It requires both creativity and discipline. The founder must be bold enough to imagine something new and humble enough to accept evidence when reality disagrees. A startup succeeds not because its first idea is perfect, but because it learns faster than its assumptions fail. Key takeaways from the book. The Lean Startup teaches that startups should be managed through disciplined learning rather than blind execution of an untested plan. Its core ideas are validated learning, the build, measure, learn loop, minimum viable products, actionable metrics, innovation accounting, and pivots. The book shows that startups should test risky assumptions early, measure real customer behavior, and adjust before wasting too much time and money. Its central lesson is that entrepreneurship is not about building more faster. It is about learning what customers truly value before scaling the wrong idea.